At a time when we're losing our oldest and most precious trees and forests from around the world, I'm curious to understand if and why this matters to all of us. Welcome to the Meaning of Trees podcast. I'm Tom Hill, and it's here that I meet with people from all walks of life to explore the answers to one essential question. What do trees mean to you? My special guest today on the podcast, Mick Diplock, is a true inspiration to all of us. A guy who lost the power of sight, something most of us take for granted, in his late 40s. Mick was determined not to let go of his passions, and he's since completed 12 triathlons blind, as well as more than 54 marathons, 166 10k runs, and 150 park runs. His stats, and he's not done yet, during a lifetime of personal challenges and endurance. Now 80 years young, I sit down with Mick to discuss his particular affection for running in woodlands and the special sensory delights that they offer him. To help bring our listeners a little closer to Mick's experiences of the woods, a friend of mine, Johannes Dell, has kindly produced a 4-minute woodland bird meditation for you to enjoy at the end of this episode. Thanks, Johannes. Before we get to that though, let's meet Mick to hear more about his story. Mick, welcome to the Meaning of Trees podcast. Thanks a lot for joining me today. And before we get a chance to hear about your life and experiences, can you tell me, what do trees mean to you, Mick?
Well, I grew up in the era where nothing was digital. There were no smartphones, no computers, no thing that would keep me indoors. So I was out all the time. I used to say if I had to stay in the evening, it was a disaster. I lived in Reigate, a lot of woodland around, and I was up in, they call it the copse, at the top of our road. And we used to play in there, climb up the trees. A lot of time I spent in the woodlands and going along the North Downs, which is going with Reigate Hill. I loved the smell and the autumn going through all the leaves. I'm getting the conkers to use for playing conkers, and we had a great time going out all the time. So trees and woodlands and the outdoors really meant a lot for me. One of my schools that I went to was Reigate Priory, which is a big park there, and our playground was the Priory Park, which was lots of trees again, and lots of green places, lots of trees.
And did trees remind you of anyone significant?
I'm not sure how to answer that, really. I like wood. My father started off as a carpenter. I used to help him with tools and make things with wood. That was the old way of doing things, with wood, with screws, hammers, making joints. Yeah, it reminded me a bit of my dad. I'd always loved wood. I passed a thing called the 13 Plus, and we had a whole morning of woodwork, which I really enjoyed, and I made lots of things from wood. Made a big record cabinet, wooden bowls, different things. I love the feel of wood. I love working with wood. And all through my life, whenever we moved into a new house, I was put up wooden shelves and cupboards and wardrobes. So that was when I could see. But yeah, I always loved working with wood. But it didn't actually remind me of anyone apart from, as I say, my dad when being a carpenter.
And I think you're bringing a really unique perspective to the podcast today, because your story is that you lost your sight in midlife. Do you want to tell us a bit more about that story, Mick? And yeah, perhaps how was life before going blind, how that occurred, and where you are now?
Yeah, I mean, I could talk for hours on this, but I'll try and be reasonably brief. As I say, I was born in Reigate in Red Hill in Surrey. I went to school in the same area, married a local girl, had 4 children. And when I entered the printing industry, I had to take an exam. And at that time, my eyesight was 20/20 vision, which, as I understand, is very good. And obviously you need that in the printing industry. You have to use a magnifying glass to make sure you got all the dots in the right place. But I had no problem with my eyes. I worked all around England until about 1980, when I got the opportunity to go to Africa, Southern Africa, and manage printing companies, train the local people on how to work the machines. My eyesight was still fine. Didn't think anything about it. In the early 90s, that's been when I was 45, 50, I started to realise that I couldn't see very well in the dark, especially driving. It scared me a bit because I'd missed things and I thought, this is not right. So I went to an optician's first and he said, I think there might be some problem here. And then I went to have a proper diagnosis. I saw a specialist and I was told for the first time that I've got an eye disease called retinitis pigmentosa. Short, it's called RP, but I think most people will know it as either night blindness or tunnel vision, and it's exactly what it said it is. Your peripheral vision starts to go and you end up looking through a tunnel or through binoculars the wrong way around. Unfortunately, with my case, it didn't stop there. The tunnel closed off completely. Not many people will go through that. Most people just end up with a little bit of vision. But mine started to deteriorate. I was then working in Botswana, in southern Africa, after having worked in Zambia, South Africa and Swaziland. I used to go to just consult with people, particularly from the university or the government of Botswana, to advise on how they could produce books, documents, official things that they wanted printing, what typeface to use, how many pages it would make, what paper to put it on, everything that they didn't know about printing. And we did our computer work on some of the first Apple computers that came out. My eyes were just deteriorating slightly. I was still driving and I realised that I wasn't seeing quite so well. Eventually I realised I had to stop doing my job as a printing consultant. We had some friends who lived right up in the north of Botswana, right on the edge of the Zambezi River, and they were looking for someone who had experience with young children to start an English medium school. My wife was a teacher, a nursery school teacher, a fully qualified teacher and nurse, and we thought, well, this is the right opportunity at the right time. In 1998, we moved up to the north of Botswana to a very small village right on the banks of the Zambezi called Kasane. It was mainly a holiday place, had a couple of safari lodges, small supermarket. We moved up there, we started this new school, and even though my eyes were going a bit, I could still work a computer. I was the bursar, did all the money side of it. We got more and more children in. In Botswana, the tribe's called the Tswana, Tswana, the Tswana tribe. 95% black children, a couple of white children, all got on very well. I continued my running. I was running there as well as I was when I worked in South Africa and all the other countries. But now we come to the fateful year, the year 2000. I saw the new year in and I could see. In September of 2000, I ran a race called City to City, Johannesburg to Pretoria, an ultramarathon, which is 50 kilometres, about 32 miles, and I ran it completely on my own, unaided. I could see. I finished the race in a reasonable time. A week later, I couldn't see. It came that suddenly. Over the week, my eyesight sort of went into negative. Things that were black were white, things that were white were black, and I couldn't see. It was quite traumatic, and one of the first things I thought was, how can I keep running? I've got a wonderful family, fantastic wife. My 4 kids are all still living in around Africa in different places. They'd all left school by then. I had my faith. which helped me. Although I sometimes say to God, what on earth's going on? Why is this happening to me? But as I say, the other main issue is, how can I continue to run? So I said, oh, what am I going to do? She said, well, we have to think of some way of doing it. So I said, let's go out on the main road. Do you sit in the car? I'll hold the wing mirror and put it in the second gear and just go slowly. And she started off, and that was fine for 100 metres. After that, I was gasping, and she says, I can't keep holding the clutch like this, I'll burn it out. I said, I can still see the emergency flashes on the car. So I'll stand behind the car, you start driving at a steady speed, and I'll run behind and with the emergency flashes on behind the car. So either she'd drive off into the distance so I couldn't see it, or she'd go so slow I'd go into the back of the car, which again was not ideal. But my son, who had moved up to Kasane as well in the north, and he was the head chef at the local safari lodge. And his wife said to me, I've got an idea, and I know you can't see it, but I've got a piece of cloth here, a circle of cloth that she said, I've sewn a piece of cloth together. She says, why don't you run with that? And there it is, 24 years later, and I'm still running with the same piece of cloth. And that's how I started running with a guide without being able to see.
So for our listeners, that piece of cloth that Mick mentions has got like a kind of giraffe print pattern on it.
Yeah.
And I know you've had some encounters with some wildlife when you were in Southern Africa.
Yeah.
Perhaps you want to just tell us a couple of those tales.
There was a college in South Africa, in Pretoria, called Optima College, and I managed to get into there for a 6-week course on how to cope with blindness, how to dress myself, how to clean myself, how to cope with money, how to cook, how to recognise clothing, and most important to me, how to touch type, because without being able to touch type, I couldn't use a computer. So while I was at that college, a bank wanted to sponsor some people to do certain things. So they came around and said, who would like to climb Mount Kilimanjaro? And I thought, yeah, that might be all right. Or who would like to run the New York Marathon? So in 2001, I ran the New York Marathon. But as you can probably work it out, 6 or 8 weeks before that, 9/11 happened. The Twin Towers came down. And people said, oh, you won't do the marathon now, so I'll cancel it. But they didn't. And I went to New York to an incredibly emotional experience running the New York Marathon. And now we come to a date that I will never, ever forget. The 2nd of February, 2002. I was living in Kasane. A friend of mine called at the house at 6 o'clock in the morning, just as the sun was coming up, to go for a run. By then I had a guide dog as well, but the guide dog was great in guiding me and walking with me, but not so good at running. So my wife said, I'll take the guide dog out for a walk. I went out with my friend Nigel, the same guy I did the New York Marathon with. We were running along this road, and suddenly I heard this incredible noise. Ah! Ah! That was an elephant crashing out of the bushes, out to the bush, straight at myself and Nigel. You don't have much time to think then. He grabbed my arm, even though we got this tether, but he grabbed my arm and he said one word, run! And we were running along the road, and for some reason, which he's never explained, he turned and we ran into the bush. The bush has anthills, it has thorn trees, it has dongas, which are holes in the ground. Not the easiest thing to get round, but we ran, and the elephant got within about 10 feet of us, coming straight at us. And I tell you, on that day, I would have beaten Usain Bolt in a 100-metre run. And suddenly, Nigel did a sharp left turn behind a thorn tree, and the elephant went straight on. That was something I will never, ever forget. And that was an incredible experience. I could go on about many other experiences with elephants and buffaloes and baboons, all just wandering through the bush. But I'll leave it at that for the moment.
Amazing, Mick. What a training regime that is. Quite an extreme one.
Yeah.
Something I'm really interested in, and when I've been thinking of what questions I might like to ask you, is about trees particularly, perhaps forests as well, and how your experience of those might have changed since you lost your sight?
I mean, even in Africa, the trees are incredible there. I'm sure you people have heard of a baobab trees, which they call the upside down trees. One of the traditions was God in his fury threw these trees down and they landed upside down in the ground. So it looks as though you've got the roots sticking out the top and the top of the trees in the ground. We had things called the flame trees, which had these wonderful, bright red flowers on it, I suppose they were. And you had many incredible trees there. When they're by the sides of rivers, they had big creepers that went over the trees as well. And you could almost sit on these creepers and use them as swings. So the trees in Africa were amazing. But coming back to this country, and we came back in 2005, and we got wonderful trees here as well. I love running on forest trails through woodlands, and one of my guides works for the National Trust, and he describes the trees and tells me why the trees have different coloured leaves at different times in the year. And the smell, I love the smell of wood, again, from my dad being a carpenter. I love the smell. When it's rained, you get a lovely smell from the trees and from all the different woodlands. And again, he describes what kind of trees were coming along, whether it's an oak or ash or silver birch or chestnut tree, and the times of the years. So sometimes we have to be very careful with the tree roots, but my guides tell me to lift my feet up a bit as I'm going over anything, or duck my head as there's a branch coming along. I have to trust them implicitly, but I still get a lot of pleasure about running through parkland and woodland. Only last Sunday I did a 10-mile race where mainly all of it, well, I say 90% of it, was on woodland trails. And again, just the smell and the atmosphere of going through woodland with the shade and the dappled sunshine coming through. It's all part of the experience that I get. So combined with my running and being out in the environment, in nature and in the woodlands with the trees around is something I really appreciate.
Are there particular times of year that you most enjoy? And what about the role of birdsong at a time like this? At springtime, you've got wildflowers out, you've got the honeydew scent of bluebells, you've got the dawn chorus as well, perhaps to enjoy, or birdsong throughout the day. Any particular season that you like, Mick?
I always used to say I liked autumn best of all, but I'm really appreciating springtime a bit more now with the different sounds. Again, with the people I run with, they describe what birds they are, and one of my guides was saying, oh, look, the skylarks have come back, and here's their distinctive call, which is nice to hear. I have another friend who loves birds, and he goes out for lots of walks. We were walking into the swimming pool yesterday. He says, I was hoping to hear a nightingale, but I haven't heard one yet. But all the other birds are all coming back in the hotter weather where they migrated. They're coming back to the British Isles for the summer times. Yeah, I love hearing the bird song. And I love the smells as well. Is it honeysuckle? I think it's got a nice smell. I'm not a great gardener or great on the environment, but I do enjoy the smells. When I'm walking through Nymans with my wife, she said, oh, come over here and smell this flower, smell that one, and smell this bush and this hedge. I still appreciate these things, even though I can't see them. They're described to me, and they have their distinctive smell and there's distinctive sounds from mainly the birds, which I enjoy.
And I've got quite a specific question, but I was wondering about how you dream these days. So in your dreams, can you see again? Or how do you experience dream life?
I dream a lot. My wife said I talk in my dreams, even shout out sometimes. Very vivid dreams I have almost every night. And my dreams go back right to my childhood. I recognise all the people in them, but they're all in the wrong places. I've got somebody from the 60s who's talking to someone from Africa I know, and it's in a different situation. So it's very confused, but I do know the people, and I go back in my dreams over my lifetime. I've been around a long time. And I've got different places, and I would wake up in the morning and say to my wife, I said, what a strange dream last night. I was with somebody I knew in Botswana, but it was happening in Yorkshire, and someone I was at school with was there. So confused in one way, but something that I recognise the place, I recognise the people. I was in the wrong place at the wrong time. So I do dream a lot, and I do dream in colour, and I do recognise, because I had, 57 years, I think it was, been able to see. But since coming back to England, I haven't seen a thing. So I remember England from the 50s, 60s, 70s and early 80s. So I don't know how things have changed now. I'm told how they changed, but I don't recognise them. So I can remember Reigate, Redhill, Horsham as they were, but I don't know how they are now. Some things are the same, some of the old buildings, but there's been many things that have changed. The road I grew up in, there's not a single car in the road. I used to sit on the curb playing marbles. Now there's cars up every side of the road. So perhaps it's better if I don't see what it's like now, or else I wouldn't appreciate it so much.
Yeah, I guess it swings and roundabouts.
Yeah.
Right? Is there one thing you'd really love to see if you could?
Oh, yeah. Colour. I miss seeing colours. I'd still recognise when someone tells me a colour what it is. I've been married twice. My first wife unfortunately died in 2009 after we came back. Quite suddenly, overnight. We went to bed, I woke up, she didn't. Lived on my own for about 3 years, and I met my present wife in church. We started talking to each other, and that was it. And I would love to see my new wife. I've never seen her, although we've been married for 12 years. I'd love to see people. I get an impression of what they look like, which is probably completely wrong from what they do look like. And there's lots of funny things happen. I was on the running track a few years ago, and people say hello, and I was running around, "Oh, hello, Mick." And off they go. I said, "Who was that?" And the guy says, "Oh, I can't remember his name, but he's got long hair." I said, "No use telling me that, is it?" So things like that happen. They describe them sometimes to me. But I always say to people, when we meet, say, "Hello, Mick, it's Dave. Hello, Mick, it's Jenny." That's great. But don't just say hello and run off. Lots of people, my friends, I can recognise their voices. But if it's someone in the running club, and we've got over 600 members in our running club, and they say hello, I'm not sure who they are. But yeah, lots of things I'd love to see. I obviously miss them. And people say, do the other senses improve? I don't know they improve, but you have to use them more. I have to use my sense of smell more, my sense of hearing more, obviously my sense of touch more. I say to my wife sometimes, "Oh, that's a lovely meal. I really enjoyed the taste of that." And sometimes she'll say, "Oh, I didn't notice. I just had the meal." But I tend to appreciate the taste of things more, and the smell was no. I say, "Oh, that's a nice smell. What was that?" "Oh, didn't notice really," someone else would say. So I take more notice of my other four senses and what they can do for me, rather than go on complaining about the fact that I can't see. I mean, it's happened. It's not going to improve. I've been through various tests, and I've been up to Moorfields Eye Hospital on various trials, but it's not going to improve. I'm not going to get my sight back, so I've got to make the best of what I've got. And that's what I try and do the things I can with the help that so many great people give me.
Yeah, Mick, you really strike me as such a resilient person. I'm looking at you thinking, if I'm looking in anything like the physical condition you are when I'm at your age, I'll be doing well. So yeah, what would be your kind of message to our listeners about how to maintain that kind of motivation in the face of adversity or perhaps challenges in our lives?
Well, again, I don't want to go on too much, but one of the things that helped me is my faith in God. I really do have a strong faith right from when I was a child. Yeah, everybody has their own beliefs. But I believe there's a God. I believe he's guiding me, and I trust him. And I have a good group of people who encourage me in that way. But I do appreciate people have other faiths. People don't have a faith, and they still go through the same things that I go through, losing your sight. And I think it's trying to have a positive outlook. They always talk about a glass half empty or a glass half full. I try and be positive about things and think, right, how can I do this? How can I get around this? What can I do? What can't I do? What would I like to do? Is it possible? Is there someone going to help me? I bore people a bit about my running, but it's really helped me. It's kept me fit. I can still go swimming. I swim, and how on earth do you swim? If I can do something, I'll have a go at it. Technology has helped as well. I got the software, can even describe a photograph, which is amazing. I don't know how it does it, but it tells me what's in the photograph. But I can send emails, I can send texts, I can have talking books, which I do, I enjoy. I've learned to use my white cane as well, the long white cane, so I can walk up to the local coffee shop, I can catch the bus, and I can do many things that first glance you think you couldn't do. There's lots of help available, even when you go out. People are very, very helpful. And if I stand in there looking lost, someone will say, "Are you all right, mate? Do you want to cross the road?" And I had this once. I was walking up the road and an Eastern European guy says, "Are you okay?" I said, "Yeah, I'm just trying to find the curb." So he grabs my arm, takes me straight across the road and says, "Hey, mate, you're at the curb." I said, "I didn't want to cross the road." "Oh, you want to go back?" I said, "Yes, please. I was only trying to find the edge of the curb so that I could walk up the road." "Oh, sorry." But I've had lots of funny things like that happen. But if you've got a sense of humour, if you've got a sense of objective, that's how you've got to go. You've got to accept it. That's your life. That's the lot you're given. Even at my age, I don't take any medication or anything at the moment, which I'm very grateful for. A lot of my friends, same age as me, are lining their tablets up along the sink every night, so it's kept me fit and healthy, and I'm very grateful for that.
Mick, there's so much to take from what you've just said there. I think I'm kind of taking notes here about, having that confidence to rely on strangers and wider community. I think in what can feel a bit like a fragmented social space these days, I think that's just so important. And clearly, you wouldn't have been able to maintain the kind of well-being and adventure in your life without relying on others. So that's, really a powerful thought.
Yeah.
I just wondered, are there any sort of places where it does make you perhaps anxious to go? I'm thinking, I know you're a Palace fan, for example. Can you go to the football? Could you go to a concert or places with large crowds, for example, or busy traffic? Anything that does kind of make you wary still.
Traffic does make me wary, particularly when I'm on my own and I'm walking with my white cane. Unfortunately, sometimes people decide to park on the pavement. Lorries, delivery vans and things, and I'll come up and suddenly there's something there. And how do I get round it? Have I got to venture into the road? Can I squeeze by on the inside? That is difficult, especially when they're a big thing like a bus or a lorry and I hear an engine going. Quite often people offer to walk me around it, particularly when they're doing roadworks and things. I'll walk up and I'll realise there's a barrier there. So I'll just say, "Anybody around? Can anyone help me?" And someone will come over and they'll walk me around and I'll say, "Thanks very much." Going to concerts and things like that. Well, I actually went to the theatre last week with my wife. Going to a football match. I've been to a few football matches. I'm a great country music fan as well. I'll listen to country music where it's being performed. Not the really top people, but I must admit I'd like to go to have a big country music concert in the O2 in London. I'd love to go there one year. So I like to participate, but I wouldn't go out of my way to go to big events. Even a big race like the London Marathon, which I have run, is a bit disquieting when you're with hundreds, thousands of people around you. So, a little apprehensive on things like that.
Mick, I'm going to start to round things up now. And I want to say I'm really grateful for your time and sharing your really unique insight on the world, and for sharing your thoughts on trees too. I hope that I bump into you in the woods soon when you're out on one of your runs.
Yeah.
And this podcast is about trees and appreciation for them, but it's also about compassion as well and looking for sources of inspiration. And I think many of our listeners are going to take some of that from our conversation today. But I'm going to hand to you now to give us one last message for people that are listening to this.
Oh. Well, as I always say to people, they say, "Oh, you've got an interesting story." I said, everyone has a story. People say to me, oh, you ought to write a book about all your experiences. And yeah, I've had experiences, I've had challenges, I've had frustrations, I've had great times that I'll never forget. But everybody has a story. Everybody has ups and downs. Everybody has challenges. Everybody has wonderful times as well, and times of sadness as well in their lives. One thing that gets me through is my faith. But you've got to find what you rely on. Friends, family, things you've learnt in your life, things you trust in. You've got to find the things that you enjoy, the things you want to do, want to achieve. Don't just vegetate. Older people used to retire at 65 and sit in the deck chair just waiting for the end. Well, that's not going to be me. That's not what I'm going to do. And I don't think it's what other people should do. Set yourself some targets, some objectives, and go for them. Short-term ones, long-term ones. Find a group of people that you enjoy, and you can help as well. Hopefully it's not for me all taking. I like to give as well. I like to encourage other people. I'm sure there's things you can do, even though you've got some health problems as well, maybe, or problems in your family. Find something that gives you satisfaction, something that you want to concentrate as your own to make your life enjoyable and worthwhile.
A big thanks to Mick for talking to me. And now, to finish the episode, some woodland sounds.